Hi, folks. This is Abel James, and thanks so much for listening to Fat Burning Man, the show with a funny title that has cool health and lifestyle hacks that can get you real results. So on this show, I'm super stoked to bring on one of my friends from Austin. His name's Chaz, and he is a man beast, a freak of nature in the best sense. And we're going to talk about his journey going and placing into and actually winning a piece of his first ever bodybuilding competition, the Texas Shredder. He placed in it for the first time using a totally unconventional, fat-based approach. We'll talk about that in a second. Before we get there, let's go to the review of the week from Amanda. She says, interesting, practical, and life-changing information. A friend directed me to Abel's website after he found tremendous success with improving his health on the Wild Diet. I was hooked immediately. I read the book in a couple hours and started listening to podcasts almost every day. I feel fantastic. Abel has a genuinely caring and kind demeanor and is funny. I love listening to the podcast, and I feel like I learn something or find inspiration from each one. I enjoy the differing perspectives from the guests he interviews, including women. I like that there is a variety of suggestions, so if something isn't working for you, you can tweak it within the framework of paleo. The exercise recommendations are helpful and manageable. Burning fat without hours of cardio? Yes, please. My husband's migraines have stopped, as well as digestive problems we have both dealt with. Thank you to Abel and everyone behind the scenes. We have never felt better. Keep it up. Thank you, Amanda, and thank you for thanking the people behind the scenes. There are plenty of them, and I'll just take a second to thank them right now. First off, my wife, Allison, does so much. I wouldn't be able to do any of this without her. Our mascot is Bailey the dog, a 70-pound Labrador retriever with way too much energy. She helps keep us all fit. And, of course, there's Melinda and Tyler and Peter behind the scenes, and you guys are freaking awesome. I couldn't do any of this without you. So if you'd like to support the show, support the team, I do this show without commercials. I've turned down a lot of money because I want to make sure that this show stays legit and high integrity. And I might support myself by bringing some things on every once in a while. But mostly right now, what you can do to support this show is go and buy The Wild Diet, my new book, which is basically a cookbook with a bunch of memoirs and cool stuff in it that teaches you that being healthy is actually pretty dang simple and straightforward if you get to the roots of it. So basically, this book is the culmination of me doing almost 150 hour-long interviews, interviewing, some of the top experts in the field, as well as, my entire life trying to be a health nut and figure out what's going on. So I think you'll like it. If you're interested, The Wild Diet is available wherever books are sold, but also the best place to get it is wilddietbook.com. And we're giving away a bunch of cool stuff, cooking gear, an HD drone for filming outdoor adventures, and a bunch of other really cool stuff. So go to wilddietbook.com. And of course, you can support this show by leaving a review on iTunes for the podcast, as well as anywhere else you might be watching or listening to this. I read every one, and I really appreciate it. All right, so let's go to this show with Chaz. Chaz Branham has coached some of the world's greatest athletes, executives, and early-stage entrepreneurs. He began his career in the fitness industry, helping college and professional athletes fine-tune their abilities in the off-season. So we get a lot of questions about ketosis, low-carb living, and losing fat as quickly as possible, and so I couldn't think of anything better than to bring on a friend of mine who has first-hand experience trying some of my crazy stuff. And we're going to talk about Chaz's journey of going from 215, Chaz is a big guy. He looks like Thor. 215 pounds and 12% body fat to 179 pounds and 3% body fat in just 14 weeks by eating butter and bacon and other super high-fat things. He did it through high-fat cyclical ketogenic dieting down to 3% skeletal body fat and actually placed in his first ever bodybuilding competition, drug-free, totally awesome. I think you're going to like hanging out with Chaz. He's certainly one of a kind and one of my close friends. So enjoy this show. Let me know what you think. Hey everyone, we are here with one of my good friends, Mr. Chaz. He's a man who looks better than Thor, if I do say so myself. And he is just a 100% freak of nature. And we're going to talk about his escapades into the world of bodybuilding and ketogenic dieting and that whole thing. Chaz, how's it going, man?
It's going well, Abel. Thanks for having me on.
Totally. This is going to be a lot of fun. I was just telling Chaz that one of the best things about having someone who's just like a friend of mine on the show is that they can talk about absolutely anything with no like hidden agendas or anything like that. So it was a really cool experience that we kind of got to go through together, because it was just like this evolving story of the ever morphing Chaz. So why don't we start at the beginning? How did you get into that whole thing?
Yeah, so this whole thing kind of started initially, we were having ribs at your house over Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And we were talking about kind of the extreme ends of kind of the paleo lifestyle and diet. And you introduced this concept of the ketogenic diet and lifestyle. And it sounded interesting. And the Super Bowl came and went. First of the year came and went. And there was this bodybuilding show in April. So this is the beginning of January. And it's a natural bodybuilding show here in Austin called the Texas Shredder Classic. And
it's a great name.
Yeah, right?
That's
It's a good name. And guys at the gym were starting to train for it. And I started asking Abel if it was possible to do bodybuilding and eat paleo. And you said, well, what would be interesting is if bodybuilders ate keto, because the science behind keto makes a lot of sense for manipulating your body composition.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it seemed completely a break from what I was used to when I did some fitness modeling, which was you manipulate your carbohydrates as your main macronutrient in order to be able to change the way that you look.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of was rattling around in the back of my head for about a week. And then I was at the gym. These guys were talking about what they were eating. They had some containers they were eating out of. And I was like, well, why don't you guys try paleo? And they're like, no, paleo doesn't work. Like, you can't eat bacon and all that fat. You're not going to lose the weight that you need or have the right body fat percentage. And I'm like, well, you know what? Why don't you just take carbohydrates out of the equation altogether?
Yeah.
And they laughed at me. And I said, you know what? I will bet you if I eat nothing but fats and proteins between now and the competition, that I'll beat you on stage.
Yeah.
And
in your first bodybuilding show ever.
Yeah, my first bodybuilding show ever. And all of a sudden, I was completely screwed.
Yeah.
And I immediately jumped on the phone and texted you. I'm like, dude, I have no idea what this is going to look like. Help me out.
Right. You're trying to get me to do it with you. I'm like, no way am I doing it.
I was like, Abel, come get a Speedo with me and we'll do posing practice and it'll be amazing. Like, yeah, right. And so I started on this journey of, education and learning around the ketogenic diet, and then trying to incorporate it into this strange universe of bodybuilding.
Mm-hmm.
And, initially I found out through reading this book, The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Living by
Great
Dr.
book.
Volek.
Mm-hmm.
And he has another book called The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Performance. And, it kind of goes through the basics of what to expect, how to supplement appropriately. And I just kind of went for it. Immediately dropped carbs out of my diet, started eating fats and proteins. And in 2 days, I think I felt just very euphoric.
Yeah.
There was sort of this almost high experience of mental acuity and energy. Like my energy went through the roof. I already looked a little leaner.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, this is easy, because I kept hearing about this wall everybody hits eventually where your body finally runs out of carbohydrate energy and switches over to using ketones and fats. And so I just kept charging on, hitting the gym hard. And about day 9, I remember I was in the gym and I was doing a shoulder press. And usually I get to a point where in that, 8th or 9th rep, I'm going to squeeze out a couple extra. And I had nothing left in the tank. The weights went down and there was no amount of grunting or intensity that was going to move those.
Yeah. And just to be fair, you're a beast. You played football. You're just a monstrous man. How much did you deadlift? I mean, your stats are insane.
Yeah. So when I started on this whole thing, I was deadlifting 630 plus and benching over 400 and squatting north of 450. So, I was able to push weight,
Mm-hmm.
but my body had depended on kind of different sources of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first time, I like couldn't explain what had happened in the gym. And so immediately broke out the book from Dr. Volek, jumped on a bunch of forums, and found out that this wall is a real thing,
Mm-hmm.
and that, it could take a day, it could take a couple of days for me to make this switch to ketosis.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started heavily pursuing fats. I remember my pre-workout meals were, a couple of tablespoons of grass-fed butter,
Mm-hmm.
and magnesium, some sodium, like stuff that I would never have
Right.
flirted with.
You're right.
Trying to find this balance where I could maintain this steady level of ketosis through the
Mm-hmm.
day, which was a different type of energy. And once I was able to find a rhythm with ketosis, all of a sudden I noticed that my energy levels no longer fluctuated throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sort of this rising tide throughout the entire day. And it was kind of strange to be able to manipulate both my composition and kind of my mental state
Yeah.
by just switching up some of the things that I was eating.
I remember,
And,
you'd come over to the house and your personality was totally different. I was just like,
oh yeah,
wow.
well, yeah, and I mean, if you do read, all of us have, most America has ADD or ADHD to some
Mm-hmm.
degree, and one of the first things that a doctor will recommend a patient that's either borderline or well into the territory of diagnosed ADD or ADHD is removing carbohydrates and simple sugars from your diet.
Mm-hmm.
And so my ability to focus for longer periods of time increased pretty exponentially by switching into a ketogenic diet mode.
Mm-hmm.
So that sounds really nice, right? Like that's a good prelude
Right.
to everybody should go into ketosis. But the
The
reality was,
honeymoon phase.
yeah, it was extremely difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to do it for the purpose of manipulating my body composition was stressful because there wasn't a lot of precedent on it. So I couldn't lean on people I knew in the industry to try and tell me how to change my fat intake or my protein intake, or was I eating too many calories?
Mm-hmm.
How should I change the way that I lifted? So there was a human
Just
petri.
minerals and electrolytes
Oh
and
yeah,
salt. Your body just functions completely
in
differently.
taking things, the minerals and salts that I was not accustomed to focusing
Mm-hmm.
on, because I would draw them from the carbohydrates that I was consuming on a normative basis.
Right.
And, so I started on this crazy journey of working out twice a day. I had to hire a guy to help me with my posing,
Yeah.
try and get a tan. It's just complete insanity. And about every week, I had a lot of, this isn't going to work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to be in the shape I want to be in. I won't be good enough. And I just decided, you know what? I've got nothing to lose with this.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go for it. And, ended up placing in my first bodybuilding show.
Dude, you rocked it.
Yeah.
It was so cool. By like every week, he'd be sending me his stats and his body fat. Where did you start? It was like 14 or something like that. It was.
I started around 12%
12.
and ended up at 3.
Yeah. So to put that into perspective, like I'm usually around like 10, sometimes 12, occasionally 8 if I'm doing a lot of training or whatever. But usually like people who are in really good shape, guys, are like 10 to 12. And like you walk around, Chaz, you've got these incredible muscles, like this huge linebacker's body. And you were trying to manipulate that too, because it's more about like the physical appearance of different muscles, the ratios, not just the strength, but also like the beauty of it. And and so it was so cool to kind of see you manipulate that down to. I remember you got to like 6%. And that only took you like a few weeks, right? And that was with a strict ketogenic approach. But then you kind of had to switch it up.
Yes. So I got to a point where I wasn't losing body fat at the rate that I needed to be stage ready.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a 2 or 3 week lull. And I started bugging Abel on, what my options would be, because I didn't want to break this ideology of using a ketogenic diet, but the ketogenic diet has kind of multiple colors available.
Mm-hmm.
So I started experimenting with target ketogenic eating and found that utilizing, sweet potatoes in a very sparing manner to store glucose in my muscles to create the illusion of looking bigger than I weighed
Right.
worked even better while being in ketosis than
it's like rocket fuel too, right? Because like you'd go to the
total
gym
rocket fuel.
after that, and
I mean, insane though, the amount of, I remember the first experiment I ran, I think I was about 5 weeks out. I ate 350 or 400 grams of carbohydrates in the form of sweet potatoes. And it takes about a day for it to kind of take effect into your muscles. And it felt like my muscles were going to tear out of my skin because it just filled every cell that I had with carbs and
carbs
glucose.
and water, right? It pulls the water into the muscles.
Pulls the water into the muscles, correct.
And out of the skin. So that's one of the ways that, fitness models and people who are taking the stage in bodybuilding events will kind of manipulate the way that they look to kind of build out the muscles and pull away the skin, which looks kind of like softer. And so a lot of people, I think, okay, so you go from like 12, which is Chaz now-ish, right, down to looking good and full of muscles and whatever, down to 6, which is like, for guys, a little bit lower than most like fitness models a lot of the time, especially depending on where you're finding them and what the point is. But that's pretty dang cut. And then it's
it was cut. My pants weren't fitting.
Yeah.
Nothing looked quite right. And it was at that point where I started questioning the sanity of the whole pursuit, right? Because
there's 6%,
and it's great.
Yeah, and you're skeletal, and then going down to 3 is like less than that, you die. Right? Like a lot of people don't understand the stakes of getting to that point where you can walk on stage. And so talk about that, like the mental thing that you were going through. Like, should I do this? What's the point? No, let's do it.
Well, as anybody that's, been alive in the past 40 years that walks into a gym, everybody knows Arnold Schwarzenegger basically created the fitness movement that has morphed and evolved in 1,000 different directions since then. And getting on stage and doing a bodybuilding show has been sort of a bucket list item for me ever since I picked up a weight. And, a big part of my personality is not quitting things that I start. And even though the entire pursuit was so sort of superficial and silly to some extent, just the idea of being able to finish it and say that I did it and know to myself that I'd completed something that I wanted to quit every week along the way, just like a personal point of accomplishment. And, it didn't help that, my energy stores were just basically increasingly more depleted as I got closer to the show. And really the most challenging time would have probably been about week 3, where it still feels like a long way away.
Right.
And I'm not ready to get on stage yet. I have a limited amount of time to get there, and I don't know if it's going to happen.
Totally. Yeah, it's like running a marathon in a lot of ways. Mile 7, mile 10, you're like, crap, I'm tired and I haven't even started yet. Mile 18, you're finished and you still have to run, another 8 miles, but you just have to keep going and kind of, keep your sanity along the way. Use it as an excuse to grow, because the things that, just watching that happen with you as a friend was incredible, because you started at, what was your weight when you started?
215.
215, and I'm usually around like 165, 170. And you're a bit taller than me. You're even wider than I am. But we have a pretty similar like size, like Wolverine-like, right?
Right.
Or Thor or whatever. And you came down to, was it like 180?
179.
179. In how many weeks?
That was 14 weeks.
In 14 weeks. So it would be illegal to put that on a product, right? Like what you were able to do.
I can't remember that.
But so you
went
from
lost more weight than I had intended.
Right.
The byproduct of using the ketogenic diet is I lost more weight quicker than I anticipated in the end.
Right.
Because when it got really serious there in the last 4 weeks, and then I had to shred some extra body fat, and I started bringing down my calorie intake while still keeping my fat high,
Yeah.
my body just shredded fat.
Yeah. So 215 to 179, and all of a sudden we were like almost the same size. You went from
Right.
being like way bigger than me to being like almost the same size, and just to see that happen, I think is a testament to what our bodies are capable of, what our bodies can withstand. You know, when you start to engage the physiology in a way that that makes sense and is built on science and good experiments, good experience as well from people around you who've kind of gone through it before. Because you started off not knowing anyone aside from me really who had messed around with the ketogenic approach, but then it's kind of like you find this whole underbelly of
Yeah.
the internet where people have been doing this for a long time, having like great success with it. And actually, when you look back at what a lot of the kind of the first generation bodybuilders were doing, the Arnold Schwarzenegger and all the guys back then with Mr. Universe and stuff like that, they were doing all sorts of crazy high fat experiments, like 36 eggs a day, like chugging heavy cream, the GAD diet, gallon of milk a
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
you know, like, so it's actually not as crazy as for some reason it appears to be today. Cause like people are just starting to get back into it. So still being very physically active and caring about performance and your lifts in the gym, your results, where does that leave you? Having kind of played on both sides of this with the carb-based approach, with the fitness modeling stuff, and then with the bodybuilding keto approach, what do you do now?
So after the show, it was kind of interesting. It was an opportunity to see how far I could take the ketogenic approach and apply it into a life that actually, had rhythm and made sense with everything else that I was involved in.
Yeah.
And the thing that I have found that works best for me is using carb backloading, which
Hmm.
is target keto
Yeah.
related to timing nutrients
Hmm.
into your body at specific times during the day. So, the way it works for me now is I don't really eat anything until about noon. So I utilize intermittent fasting and basically bulletproof coffee.
Hmm.
So I eat coffee, maybe a handful of almonds. I might have, some bowl with nothing but meat and veggies from Chipotle, in the early afternoon. And then
Yeah.
I don't eat again until after I work out in the late afternoon.
Hmm.
And the reason folks recommend you work out late in the afternoon is for men, according to like circadian calendar theory, the most testosterone and growth hormone
Hmm.
was released into the system during the late afternoon between like 4 and 7 p.m. So if you lift like an animal in the afternoon
Hmm.
and then eat like an animal basically until you go to bed, your body responds tremendously well to that. And I
Yeah.
put on, I jumped from 179 back up to 210 in like 2.5 months.
Yeah. It was nuts how fast you came back.
Yeah. And then I found it so easy to stack on additional size
Hmm.
and do it in a lean manner,
Yeah.
not dirty bulking by eating just a bunch of crap.
Hmm.
I was able to get up to 235 by the fall after the April show
It's nuts.
and was back at about 11 or 12%.
So that's
It's
like,
incredible.
yeah, you came down to my size from enormous, and then you basically put me on in terms of
Right.
body weight and got even 20 pounds bigger than that. So why
Yeah.
do you think it was so easy to gain in a clean way? Was it the fasting? Was it the carbs? Like, what was the thing that you kind of felt best about?
So the thing that I felt best about was utilizing intermittent fasting with nutrient timing.
Hmm.
So the backloading approach allowed me to have a life and also be very serious about my fitness.
Hmm.
And in the nature of the kind of the scheduling world that I exist in, right, with running a business and being a part of a venture capital fund,
Hmm.
I don't have time to eat, 5 or 6 small meals out of a Tupperware container every
Right.
day. I mean, it just doesn't make sense and it slows me down.
Hmm.
It creates energy level swings. And so being able to eat this way allows me to be serious about fitness and be serious about everything else in my life and not let my fitness monopolize my life.
How much time do you think this way of doing it saves compared to the, 6 a day Tupperware variety of eating?
I mean, it's got to save me 10 to 15 hours a week
Yeah.
because I'm not doing the meal prep
Hmm.
and there are so many solutions that I can utilize for quick serve restaurants around Austin
Hmm.
where I can get what I need and not worry about, asking them if they can take out this and put in that. I
Right.
mean, you can basically go get a burger without a bun.
Yeah.
It's simple.
Yeah. Austin spoils you.
Yeah, well, Austin definitely is an unfair advantage in that department.
You have another unfair advantage, though, and that's that you don't drink. You don't drink alcohol. And so,
Correct.
compared to, can you talk about that as someone who doesn't do it and the advantage from your perspective? Because I certainly have mine, and I enjoy
Sure.
wine from time to time, and I know that you could just trounce me in so many different ways. But can you talk about that?
Yeah,
Because
I
that's
mean,
huge.
the first thing that it does for me is it allows my body to work as efficiently as I feed it.
Hmm.
So I know that I don't have to worry about having a wild night or a binge and dealing with the next, 3 to 5 days of my body hating me for that.
Right.
And, I also save a lot of money.
Yeah, true. You do. And it's something that I definitely use from time to time. I was totally straight edge until I went to college, so I can definitely put that hat on. And when I do, like when I needed to write my book, do a bunch of media, do all this other stuff at the same time, and knew that just sleeping would be hard enough to get, I have no problem like cutting out alcohol. That's pretty much the first thing to go. And you're totally right. Like, can you see in the gym the guys who are in the pissing match with you or whatever for the big lifts or for leaning down? Can you see what it does to them after an enjoyable Austin style
Well, yeah,
Saturday night or
well,
weekend?
first you can smell it,
Yeah,
right? You
you totally
smell
can.
somebody sweating it out at the gym. And also, any of the guys I know that are competitive Olympic lifters or competitive athletes, either professionally or at the amateur level,
Hmm.
drinking just slows you down,
Yeah.
doesn't allow the body to perform at its highest levels.
Hmm. Yeah, that's what I experienced when I was running, and I would a lot of times, especially when I was doing like the longer runs, it's not a good idea to tax your liver that much by doing that much endurance exercise and then drinking as well. Like a lot of people will have a bunch of beers after a long run or something like that, but that's not really a good idea. You might be able to get away with the carbs, but in terms of what you're doing to your system. So I measured what would happen if I just, had one glass of wine or 2 glasses of wine. And for me, I don't even really feel in my brain the effects of one glass of alcohol or one beer or one whatever. But the next day I do. When I go out for my run, all of a sudden for the same level of effort, I'm running 10 seconds per mile slower, which is a huge deal for one glass of wine.
Well,
And that's
absolutely.
and that's the thing that you don't really expect, because for someone who does drink, it's just like you have good days and you have bad days. But if you don't drink, it's like you get used to waking up every morning with just this, energy that you can't get if you're drinking.
Well, essentially, alcohol consumption taxes the liver, like what you said, and the health of our blood has so many ramifications
Hmm.
on how we feel and perform. And cutting it out completely, I forget a lot until I
Hmm.
run into somebody that's on the struggle bus drinking too much.
The
Like, man,
struggle
am I
bus.
grateful that I don't have to deal with that? Like, I don't have to wake up, suit up, and show up and try
Right.
and fake it till I make it. Like, it just doesn't have to happen for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how do you think, how does that affect your habits? A lot of people, I think especially overlook sleep when you're trying to lean down or even put on size. What does that look like for you if you're not going out and binging on Saturday nights or whatever with a bunch of gym rats? Because it kind of messes with your whole system in a lot of ways, right? So what does your system look like in contrast?
So, I mean, my system, right? I work a lot
Hmm.
and I get totally wrapped up in what I do professionally. And the going out piece, I utilize social situations that involve alcohol as a means for mixing with other humans,
Yeah.
right? And
If you can even
there's
call them that.
right. Well, and there's definitely a spectrum, right?
Yeah, they
The
transform into
first,
monkeys over the course of the night.
right. So I don't have to stay for the entire time.
Right.
And as a result, I have the luxury of being able to get the sleep that I need and get up early if I want to
Hmm.
or not,
Yeah.
and go after the things that I need to tackle.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, especially if they are trying to do the physical thing, they sacrifice the social thing. But I know
Right.
you're someone who's very successful in, the first thing people ask you when you're not drinking at a party is just like, why aren't you drinking? You have to drink. It's like total guilt trip. And I've seen it happen to you
Sure.
so many times. It's happened to me. It's happened to everyone. But I think you handle it with such grace and class, and it's such an awesome card to play, even temporarily. For
Yeah.
people who are listening, even if you do enjoy wine or whatever, like the choice not to drink is sometimes the best thing you can ever do. Certainly for results oriented shows and races and things like that. But even more than that, if you're looking at constantly trying to improve and be consistent, then how do you measure the fact that when you go out for a week and you lose 10 seconds again, and then you're coming back to that time every week, as opposed to someone who's not doing that and getting 10 seconds faster in spite of you? So keep that in mind. I think it's something, Chaz, that you do so well. You don't have to sacrifice your social life at all. In fact, you can be the life of the party because you're not slobbering all over yourself.
No, it's totally true. And anytime somebody does ask me the question, the easiest response I give is it's just a health choice.
Yeah.
And that always sparks a conversation with people.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of folks feel out of place if they decide to not drink at a social situation.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is most people don't care. I
Yeah.
mean, I've discovered most people just don't care that I don't drink.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect how they see me or what they think about me.
Yeah.
And, a lot of folks feel pressure, like if I'm in a social situation or a business event, like I need to have a drink, and you just don't.
Right. It's awesome, especially in the business you're in. Why don't we talk about that a little bit too? How you're able to improve your productivity through diet, through fasting, through how you're basically rationing nutrients throughout the day and then at night too. Why don't you talk about that in terms of like how do you get the best work done on the job and also be a bodybuilder, right?
Sure. Well, because I do the intermittent fasting and carb backloading, I have the luxury of not having to take lunch breaks.
Mm-hmm.
So when I schedule things, I'm able to schedule things back to back for the entire day.
Yeah.
And I'm not distracted by hunger or sort of the hunger pangs or feeling lulls in my energy, because I am confident in my ability to provide my body what it needs at the right times.
Yeah.
And so it just allows me to move quicker, and I have so much more focus when I am disciplined in utilizing a ketogenic approach with the intermittent fasting and the backloading.
Yeah. Cool. So you didn't necessarily want to stick with strict keto as a lifestyle choice, but having experienced that, it changed kind of your perspective on how you're doing stuff now. So what would you say to someone if they're going to skip the part of the whole
I recommend
bodybuilding?
you skip that part.
Yeah. If they're going to skip that and just start fresh tomorrow, what would you tell them?
I would recommend that everybody go through the process of allowing your body to become fat adapted.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is the process of getting your body into a state of ketosis. And then at that point, utilizing carb backloading and intermittent fasting or not to have a pragmatic approach that fits into lifestyle with the ketogenic kind of theory and ideology.
Yeah. Dude, that's awesome. So we're just about out of time. Before we go, why don't you tell folks where they can find you, what you're up to, and a little bit about what you do? I think it's really cool.
Sure. So I'm in Austin, Texas. I am a venture capitalist. I helped found a venture capital fund here in Austin last March during South by Southwest. And we're a seed stage venture capital fund, and we invest in tech companies here in Austin, Texas. We've made 10 investments and had one exit in the last 12 months.
Wow.
So we are up and to the right, as they say. Data points are all trending the right direction. So we're really excited. And I also advise a pre-portioned paleo meal delivery service called Fixed Foods. And they utilize technology to simplify the delivery process for getting meals to people's homes and offices. And they started in August, and they'll do about 5,000 to 7,000 meals this month. So they're up
That's
into the
killer.
right as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very exciting.
Cool. Yeah, it's awesome to see tech start to collide with the food world because all of a sudden you get all these efficiencies where you can eat really good food. One of the biggest problems with trying to lean down or be fit or whatever is just like fueling at the right time because timing is so important, as you well know. So like having that stuff ready, it's really exciting that like apps will be doing that soon and they already kind of are. You know what I mean?
Well, and with food, right? Food has been this incredibly difficult space to innovate in
hmm
because of the physical necessity of the food and making the food. And to make the food, you need people. And so the approach that I'm seeing folks doing in the industry is they're treating the companies as a technology firm
hmm
whose product is food.
Right.
So some of that is semantics, right? You can phrase whatever you're doing in any way you want to, but the fact that founders are approaching creating food companies with technicians
hmm
makes all the sense in the world and gives a lot of hope for scalability.
Yeah, it's rad because that's one of the biggest problems, and the question that I get asked the most from the outside world is this sustainable? How can people eat this way? And I think that
Correct.
technology actually holds a lot of promise, ironically enough, for eating like a caveman.
Absolutely. So if you
That's
guys
pretty
are
cool.
looking for me, you can find me at atxseedventures.com, and you can find Fixed Foods at fixedfoods.com, or you can Google me and you'll find some pictures of me in a Speedo.
Yeah, oh, it's a beautiful thing. Chaz, thank you so much. I think people will really like this one. It's so real. Thank you for sharing like the more intimate parts of it because I know what you did was not in any way easy. So thank you for that.
No, sir. Thank you, Abel.